This episode is sponsored by Furniture Box. Check them out in the description below. What is it that's different about running a company like Tenzing?
I probably got one of the most purposeful brands, at least on the energy shelf. If you ask the CEO of Coca-Cola, would you rather make your Coca-Cola healthy? Of course he'd say yes, but he can't.
Speaking of which, I'm actually just going to crack mine.
Yeah.
You're working at Red Bull. How does the idea come about?
I believe that it should be possible to get energy from plants and not to have artificial ingredients or loads of sugar or be marketed by carbon guzzling stunts. I remember her words really well. She was like, this could work.
How do you shake the stigma?
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually. I Googled mistakes people make when they launch an own business.
How do you set yourself apart from your competitors in such a big space?
Don't go on social media. In the beginning, it's all about the product. Finding something that you actually do as opposed to creating a piece of content. Red Bull's an amazing example. But we are growing like 4 times faster. You know what the worst piece of content on YouTube is?
This is the biggest YouTube beef since Jake
Yeah. That guy sucks.
Let's get into the beef.
Thanks for coming on. It's really excited to have you. I suppose just before we go into kind of the story and sort of where you are today, it'd be helpful really just to get a bit of an idea of kind of your background.
So I was I started Tenzing about 7 years ago now, 2016. And before that, from a work perspective, I started at Unilever. So I always always into marketing. I like kind of creating things. Then I realized quite quickly that it was more management than creating things at Unilever. So I moved to MTV, which was still cool at the time.
Yeah.
I had a great time at Unilever, by the way, as well. But a lot of my friends are still from there. And but MTV was just really cool as well. I think what was nice there is it was just when the social media stuff started kicking off. So it was before Facebook was around, and we had this local social media platform in the Netherlands that I was responsible for, together with one other. And then I remember Facebook coming. And I was like, oh, this could be quite big. And then it kind of just blew us away. And as did YouTube with MTV. You guys probably still kind of remember the MTV times.
So I definitely do.
But
MTV Cribs springs to mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of, number one TV show.
And I remember the time before YouTube was bought by Google. And I remember distinctly, I think I was in year 8 or year 9. And my friend said, oh, you got to see this video online. There's this thing called YouTube. And I said, no, Google Video is what you should use. And he went, no, this YouTube thing's really good. And I was like, mate, this is Google, all right? Where's this YouTube thing going to be in a few years?
And here we are.
Exactly.
Another savvy business decision.
Exactly.
Good.
But it was like, before that, you would you go, oh, have you seen this new video from whatever, Nirvana? And you just watch MTV for a week to see it come by once. Yeah. And then, of course, YouTube make that just kind of redundant every night. And it was quite funny because then it was, MTV started doing all that kind of, they were really ahead of the curve and all the Big Brothers and, it was actually there. Remember MTV Real Life? So they did all that kind of stuff. But then people were complaining, like, why don't you show the music anymore? Well, I said, well, if you'd watch the music, we would show more of it, but you're not watching that anymore. So that was it was a very, very interesting experience, and I learned a lot for the media side and the content side, and
I bet.
And the social side. And then moved to Red Bull, where I was for 8 years. I was head of marketing for the Netherlands, and then for Europe, and then for the UK. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so you're sort of seasoned marketer.
Yeah, if you like. And I've always liked the. More like the create, like not making an ad, but like doing something that is like nice for people and relevant for people, like events. I've always found really interesting. And
go on.
I was going to say, so from what I understand from your time at Red Bull, you were quite sort of important and significant in the process of taking it from just a drinks business to more of a media company. Can you sort of touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the cool thing, of course, I had my FMCG background with Unilever and then the content side with MTV. And when I joined Red Bull, YouTube wasn't, or like, I didn't think YouTube, although I say MTV was ruined by YouTube, I don't think YouTube was actually even around by the time, when did YouTube launch?
Was it like 06?
206?
Probably.
Yeah, so.
Something around that.
Yeah, so they either were not there or not. I don't think they were there yet. And then, what was cool about Red Bull, I was just there. I can't say I initiated that process or anything, but I was part of that amazing journey to go through from like an energy drinks business to like a pure content business that it is also today. And the cool thing about Red Bull was that they already did quite a lot. Of course, they had all their events already. So, and when the content thing became a thing, because of YouTube and all the kind of content platforms and the Facebooks and everything, they were already doing a lot of stuff that you essentially had to like put a camera on. So that's one of the reasons they were also so well ahead of the curve.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so where did the idea for Tenzing come from then?
Speaking of which, I'm actually just going to crack mine open.
Yeah. What flavour is it you've got?
I've got pineapple and passion fruit.
Nice.
And it's 100% plant-based, which obviously I endorse.
That's just
quite a fan of that.
Yeah.
Very cool design, by the way, if I can. This is not product placement, by the way. We were not paid to say this, but that is very cool.
Yeah. Well,
thank you. Cheers.
I think it was so also actually I forgot to say in my I launched a own.
Sorry, that's really good.
Yeah.
Sorry. Really awkward. You turned around and said the opposite.
No, but I would have just stayed silent. Sorry, please.
No. You tell me more.
How great is it?
Yeah.
No, it's really like refreshing.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't like I wouldn't if you didn't tell me this was an energy drink, I would not think this is an energy drink.
I'm gonna try mine.
Which I like. I'm quite anti-energy drinks.
Yeah.
Because they're just so unhealthy for you.
Well, yeah, but that's sort of the thing. Now it sounds like we're doing a sponsor.
It does. It really does.
There's got to be another way, you know. But this doesn't. This feels like it's sort of like the equivalent of drinking something. Right.
That really is actually delicious.
Yeah, I want to try a bit of yours.
You
after.
should. Yeah.
It's sort of like the equivalent of drinking something like a hard seltzer if you're drinking alcohol compared to drinking like a beer. It's like it's like the equivalent of that. Like that doesn't feel like I didn't sip that and go, okay, that's probably messing me up.
Yeah.
True.
Right. No, it tastes clean. It tastes clean.
Yeah.
I love that. Wow.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you very much.
Wow.
No, sorry. Side note. Sorry. So yeah, where did the idea come from?
Well, so I actually forgot one bit in my working life was that I started my own business during my other work.
Okay.
Which was I thought I started a fashion business. Start at the bottom with socks.
Okay.
And it was like also at the beginning of the internet. And I thought, okay, what is a fashion item that people don't need to now? Of course, that's all normal. Yeah. But you would back in the day, you wouldn't go, well, I'm just going to buy some pants and never try them on.
Yeah.
So I thought, what's an item that you can actually, put through the mail? We wouldn't try it. It was a sock. So and I thought, and it was also, I still remember when I was young, there was these boxer shorts were always like, you could get them for like £2, and then like Marky Mark, I don't,
yeah, the Calvin Klein,
Klein stuff came along, and I was like, now people buying boxer shorts for like 50 quid, and you don't really see a boxer short that much, and I think but the sock had not been revolutionized, so that's what I set myself out to do. I was going to revolutionize the sock online business. You can send it through the mail, and it was quite a nice concept. It was like, it was a doctor that would prescribe you a sock, so you do an online a psychological test.
Oh, cool.
It was like I showed you like a carrot and said, "What do you see?" And like so bullshit.
Yeah.
And then at the end of this whole thing, it would prescribe you a sock, and it was really nice in a doctor's little thing with a little prescription note. It said, "Wear once daily with clothes."
Okay,
right.
Yeah.
So it was quite, and it was actually before Happy Socks was even around.
Right. Okay.
But then I just got my job at Red Bull, and I really enjoyed that. So I thought, okay, well, let's just sell that. And I didn't, not that I earned any money, I just didn't make any loss, which is quite, I thought, a good thing for
that's a good
first venture.
Exactly. Yeah, for a first venture.
And still socks. I still wear those socks to this day.
Interesting.
But what I learned a lot from that is that, you have to do a business that you know a lot about. I at least thought. Because I didn't know anything really about fashion or online business. The concept, I think, was spot on, but I didn't really know a lot about it. And then secondly, you have to do something that you enjoy doing. So I loved making that brand. Like, that's what I'm talking passionately about. Yeah. We did a socks-only fashion show on the Amsterdam International Fashion Week with models wearing only socks. Got a lot of press.
Only socks?
Yeah, I bet.
So I love that. But then after it was launched, it was very kind of operational. So it's like the websites had to keep going. It was also before like you had all these agencies that would do the fulfillment for you.
I'm with you.
You needed like a minimum 50,000 socks. So me and my girlfriend at the time, we were like, folding these socks ourselves into these packaging, writing those notes. And after a while, it gets kind of, so I didn't really enjoy the business, running a socks business that much.
Okay.
And thirdly, I learned like you have to go all in. Like I did it next to the job, I was like, do this on the side, and you can't do those things. So, but I did get my like bug for starting something going.
That's interesting, actually. Just picking up on that point, why do you think you can't run a business alongside a full-time job? Because there are some people that may disagree with that have built kind of successful businesses.
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, because I actually, by that mean psychological, you have to go all in.
Okay.
but don't go all in financially, because I also did that. You probably read Shoe Dog.
Yes,
one of my favorite books.
Very good.
And he was an accountant for 10 years, and I think they've even have a stat out that if you have a normal job while launching your business, you're more likely to be successful. But I just felt at the time, if I look back at it, and I felt at the time I didn't really go all in. I was like enjoying my normal jobs too much, like my job at MTV, job at Red Bull. So I was never gonna stop that to do this. So I didn't go all in from this is my dream. Okay. I'm gonna, so it's more like a mental go all in, but still stay like,
financially responsible.
And
So can I just ask, based on what you said a second ago, I thought it was interesting when you mentioned the point about with the sock company, how eventually it became sort of more of a burden than an enjoyment situation. What is it that's different about running a company like Tenzing in terms of surely those operational issues and the kind of burdens of making sure there are sort of product orders and minimum order quantities and things like that? Surely you have those same burdens. So what's the difference between those two situations?
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually, because it was super painful at Tenzing as well. But I think it's the commitment thing. It's like, I believe in all my being that it should be possible and it should be a thing to drink, to get energy from plants and not to have to, have artificial ingredients or loads of sugar or be marketed by carbon guzzling stunts, so I just believe that more in my whole system. And I thought, and I also there is an element of loving what you do, because like I knew in the beginning, like if we would get bigger, in the beginning we didn't do a lot of that, but in the beginning we did like have a trip to like the Himalayas, and because I love the climbing or mountaineering, like hiking, I love surfing, so I loved all the aspects that were tied to energy. In socks it's not, it just wasn't as. Sure. So I think you have to have something that really keeps you going. Also the sustainability angle at Tenzing, I was really keen on that one. And we actually did it for charity as well with the socks, but I was just not as connected with that emotionally that I was with Tenzing. So I think it's a difference of like, I'm really want to make this happen and like do something that you can't go back on there.
Totally. Yeah. So if we go back to the very beginning of Tenzing, you're working at Red Bull, you have the idea. How does the idea come about? And then what makes you think about actually pursuing it?
So I was like, also, I think I left Red Bull, and I'd been there for 8 years, and I've always, to be honest, great colleagues and a great brand, but I'd come disenchanted with the product a bit. And, so I thought, okay, so I left, and I thought, it wasn't like a clear cut, I'm going to start my own business. And then there was a bit like, should I work for another company? Should I start my own consultancy, whatever? But actually quite clearly and soon I found out, no, this is what I want to do. And it came back. So the very beginning concept was, and it still is, energy that's plant-based, low calorie and sustainable. Let's go find if that's possible. How would that look? How would that taste? And that was the beginning.
So what's the very first step? So you have the idea, because I think for anyone that might think about having a product-based business, I think the hardest question is, probably capital. But second to that, the hardest question is, I don't even know where to start. I mean, if I was to start a Coke-based drink, I would have no idea how to go about doing that. So how did you know what to do and where to go?
So there was a two-step approach. Sounds really calculated now, but that was like just like the thing to. So first of all, obviously, it's like I had a job that brought money in, and then I didn't. So it was like, okay, so my wife and I had small children at the time living in London, not the cheapest place to live. So it was like, okay, I made a whole, and so I said to my wife, I said, like, I want to do this, and she's like, I don't think so in first instance. And I said, like, give me a month. And I built the business plan a bit, and also looked at our financial situation. I said, okay, what are all the things that we have to stop doing? We had to move to a smaller house, all that kind of stuff. And then I remember presenting to her, and I remember her words really well. She was like, "This could work." That was and she's also actually kind of in the marketing business space. Right. So getting her validation was the first kind of little important moment. And then, but we did have to move house, all that stuff. So
big commitment then from day one.
It was, yeah, exactly. And like we had to give up our gym membership, and then we had to really literally like see what's the money coming in, and assuming I wouldn't get any salary for like 2-3 years.
She must have really believed in you then. To commit, it's one thing to say, hey, give it a go, and if it works, it works. Another thing to be like, hey, my quality of life is now going to have to take a hit for who knows how long.
It's a big commitment. It's a really big commitment.
That's quite a
testament to the relationship, definitely.
For sure.
Definitely. And you need that kind of, commitment, right? Especially if you're alone, it doesn't matter. But I think it really has helped me. Also, it's actually funny enough having kind of young kids, because I've worked from home for about a year and a half. Just building the concept and everything, launching it, and just having that. It's so doubtful all the time. And I'd I'd go have a Tesco meeting and I'd ask my kids, like, would you still love me if this doesn't go ahead? And they'd be like, 500 times. Yes, we would, Daddy. That kind of works.
Yeah.
So that was the first step. Get buy-in.
Yeah.
From the most important person. And then I remember that was that kind of little cool moment where I remember sitting down. I was like, okay, so this is now going to happen. And actually, what I did was I Googled mistakes people make when they launch an own business.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's an interesting place to start.
That's it. Yeah, and it was a really good place to start.
Yeah.
Because what came up was this Harvard Business Review article, and it was about effectively the minimum viable product theory, but that was used a lot in digital products, but not so much in real life products. So what they all said, and they had, which was really good as well, they interviewed people that made it, but also people that didn't make it, which I think is a way better place to start. I would add that, interview those.
Literally, Ben Corrigan, one of our previous guests, he went on Dragon's Den, he got all 5 offers, built a great company. But he's often said, when I told him about the idea of this podcast before we'd launched, he said, I've always been interested in the idea of like hearing from people whose businesses failed.
Yeah.
Because that's
you learn a lot.
Because you learn more from your failures. And he's said that for years. That really just hearing
you should
say
do
that.
You know why? It's also actually the answer is really simple. Why you learn more from them? Because if you launch a business and it goes well, you never really know why it goes well.
Yeah.
Because
that's a piece of inside knowledge, right?
It's like it's all these things that you do, and then you keep going at it, and then. But if it goes wrong, it's usually one reason.
Yeah.
So and then you could at least tell other people, don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, you look at someone like, I don't know, in music, like Ed Sheeran was busking, I think, every day for like at least a year, every single day.
Yeah.
That's very different to, a teen pop star getting signed by a label, having a summer single that goes to #1 and then never being heard of again.
Yeah, true.
It's
true.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. So I Googled that, and then it said, look, go to validate your product, which again, like you argue is nothing new, but also in my aspect, and then actually, because people always think, it's so hard to create the product, but actually that's the relatively, what I also found was interesting is that when you're at a big company, you get a meeting with everyone, right? Because you could just go, look, whatever. I had massive budgets, huge teams. I was get me a meeting with the head of Sky Sport, whatever, and they'd come to my office with it. So what's interesting there from a psychological point of view, you don't need anyone. Effectively, really, that's true, right?
Yeah.
And then as soon as you start for your business, you need people. And I think that is also such a great thing to have. That you need other people. That's more a natural state, actually.
Yeah.
And so I thought the process was really like humbling in a beautiful way, because also I didn't have any image around like go to the bar and say, I work there. I signed that athlete, or I did this and that. I was just like, what do you do? Nothing really. I'm working on this thing, and it was more painful than I would have thought emotionally, actually. But also you need those people, and people are willing to help. So I was just looking for, I spoke to professors and doctors, like, because the cool thing, if you launch something new, because like, let's say an energy drink or a Coca-Cola, these were launched hundreds of years ago, right? Or energy drink 30 years ago. So back then they had different science, different habits, different things were important. And the good thing is that, let's say Coca-Cola, if you could ask the CEO of Coca-Cola, would you rather make your Coca-Cola healthy, and you wouldn't lose any business? What would he say?
Oh, yeah.
Of course he'd say yes, but he can't, because he's stuck with this product that people like, and it's full of sugar or full of aspartame. So, and then when you start again, you go, look, I'm going to start from scratch. Like, what is important now? Like all these artificial sweeteners, we're getting a lot of bad press. No one cared about artificial sweeteners 30 years ago. So you could just start again, and that's the cool thing. You speak to all these people, Also like how much caffeine do you actually need? How much sugar do you actually need? So sugar was actually a big topic.
Yeah.
For me, actually it was even before the sugar tax was around.
Right.
I mean, it was already kind of a topic, but for me, it was like, how much do you actually need for energy as opposed to taste?
Yeah.
So I know I'm going a bit off topic now.
No, please.
But I thought that was a really interesting one because, because every drink in the market is got 11% sugar in it. So whether it's an orange juice, an apple juice, a Coke, a Red Bull Monster, 11% sugar. So
you almost don't want to know the figures.
Oh no! I tried to cut out sugar at one point.
Yeah.
I've seen so many I've read studies on how bad sugar is and watched plenty of videos on it. It's in everything. At one point, I tried to say I'm going to quit sugar for a week, and I went to I think Tesco, Sainsbury's. I tried to buy like a salad pot or something. Even that had sugar in it. It's in everything. So you're absolutely right.
But I'm talking about drinks specifically here. That they all have 11%. So if you take the sugar out, all the artificial sweeteners are brought to that level, the level that we have become accustomed to. So when I found out through the doctors and nutritionists, what you need is about 4.5% sugar, because that's the same as your blood sugar levels.
Right.
So you don't get that spike and the crash.
Yeah.
So you get enough energy. So if there's nothing in there and you have sweeteners, your body thinks it's getting sugar, but it's actually not. So you get this insulin spike and blah, blah, blah. So the perfect amount is 4. So sugar's not bad. You need sugar. So the doctor I worked with was really cool. He said, look, if you go on an IV drip and they don't put a bit of sugar and salt in there, that 4.5%, you will die.
Wow.
So you just need sugar,
but
you don't need that much. What like the Monsters have in there is just for flavor, not for effect.
Yeah.
So those are kind of things in the product thing you can just find out, like you just by Googling, by speaking to people. But this article said, go to market, validate their products. So what I did, I thought, okay, in the beginning, I thought I want to go into like the gym bouldering space. I want to go to like offices. I don't want to go to universities. Sorry. And so what I did, I just went to I went to the Google office, for instance, and I had my little bottles, all these different flavors. I had my name, but I had like a little like different kind of designs.
Yeah.
And I just said, look, I love I got a meeting through friends or whatever. And I said, I want to launch this product, but I just love your input. Like, would you sell a thing like this? Which flavor do you like? Which design do you like? And then what happens is you don't sell it to them. You actually ask for their opinion.
Yeah.
And everyone then gives their opinion. And they all said, we'll take this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So looking back, I should have done that way more. This is more to validate my product.
Okay.
And then I thought, this is going to be super easy. I then made the product, went to market with it, and no one wanted it anymore, because then you go into the selling mode.
Yeah.
So that would be my big tip. Just go to market, because the whole saying of like, everyone thinks their own baby is the most beautiful baby.
Yeah.
But if you've co-created this thing, actually, you don't have to fake it. You can go like, oh, I remember someone said, I didn't think the design is natural enough.
And it's also really cool, the idea of like going to someone saying, hey, what do you think of this? Knowing at least in your head, it's a great product. If you genuinely are adding value to people, if you go to someone and say, hey, try this, and they try it and they like it, they are just going to want it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and as you said, that's a customer that you've got without having to sell.
Exactly. It's like no one likes being sold to.
Right.
No.
But everyone likes giving advice.
Yeah, of course.
On branding, I wanted to ask, I wanted to touch on something you said a second ago, which is obviously all of these drinks have an 11% sugar level and things like that. And we touched on how obviously the opinion everyone has about energy drinks being really bad for you, really unhealthy, and filled with sugar. And as I said to you, I think it was before we went on air, I don't drink energy drinks. I've never liked them. I used to drink them when I was younger, but again, for that thing of, I know there's a lot of shit in them.
Yeah.
And I'm actually, by the way, really happy that I got to try a Tenzing for the first time on air, because I didn't want to have a biased opinion. And this is actually really nice, and it is really refreshing. And I'm not just saying that. So what I'm curious about is, in this industry, how do you shake the stigma for people like me? If I wasn't interviewing you, I don't know if I would have tried Tenzing, because I would have heard energy drink and immediately switched off.
Yeah.
So how do you shake that, aside from just listing the fact that it's plant-based and it's refreshing?
If only I knew.
Converting the unconverted. Yeah.
So what is also, I think if you want to start your own business, I think it's crucial that you're extremely naive. Because it's so much tougher than you think. And I actually thought, because I knew there was worries. I was in this industry for a long time. So I knew that people thought, oh, I worry about the artificial. Exactly like you said, it wasn't any rocket science. People know that you could find that out if you weren't in the industry. It was like, that was like readily available data. People worry, and they worry about the artificial side and the high sugar. So I thought, super easy. I launched something that's plant-based, low-calorie. People lap it up. But it doesn't work that way. So you launch it, people don't get it. It's like yourself, right? Yeah. You might have read about it before, you still wouldn't try it. So it's really...
Or you don't believe it. You think there must be a catch. There's something they'll use to make it,
Yeah, exactly. So it just... And I think that's kind of another really important bit. It takes time. It's that classic thing about, what's the most likelihood of you getting solar panels on your roof is when your neighbor has them. Right, because you see them up there, you feel a bit missed out.
Some validation, I suppose.
Some validation, some social proof. So again, and that's the thing why you've got to stick it out, because the more we sell, the more people drink us, the more people will drink us. I think it's just that it's also partly like that's why you have to have that long runway. If every time I speak to someone who goes, oh yeah, I'm launching this business, I want to do an exit in 2 years, I'm like, it's never going to work.
Good luck. Yeah.
You've always got these anomalies of like, oh yeah, that's scaled so quickly, but usually they've been going. Like Oatly is a great example, right? They launched in the 80s or the 90s, and only till they rebranded and like veganism became way bigger, and they rode that wave extremely well. But it was already 20 years. They've been, making that product perfect, and so it just takes a lot of time to do that. And then I think you just chip it. Well, like I remember in the beginning, also what I did. I try to get through my network. I try to speak to as many people as I possibly could, doing what you're effectively doing now, and asking. Like I got my biggest meeting was with Richard Reed from Innocent.
Right. Okay.
And also I asked them all the same, what's the silver bullet? And none of them had one.
Yeah.
There is not one silver bullet. But you can learn from people, of course. What they've done, what they didn't do.
Definitely.
But but one thing I would say is like, you have to like see it as a long thing. And also that's why you have to enjoy the journey. I've always believed that it's not going to get better. It's not going to get better if we're twice the size. I love it now. Yeah. To be honest, I'm nearly in this phase. It's like, I love this phase, So I want to like get out of that again and grow, because obviously it's crucial to keep growing.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second to talk about our sponsor for this episode, Furniture Box. Furniture Box is an online furniture retailer that makes awesome products for everywhere from your bedroom to your office. Now, we actually had Monty and Dan, the co-founders, on our show. That's how we met. We loved their story and we hung out with them afterwards, and we knew that we wanted to work with them. And here's the thing. One of the biggest issues I have whenever I've ordered furniture in the past is that certain big name furniture companies, not naming any names, will charge you a fairly large fee for delivery. And even then, that delivery usually takes a few days, if not longer. With Furniture Box, not only do they offer free next day delivery, but they're now planning on extending their delivery cutoff even more, so that you can literally order a dining set as late as 8 p.m. and be eating dinner on it the next day. So to put it simply, there's no one in the UK furniture scene that's doing anything like what they're doing, and we're thrilled to have them as our sponsor. So click the link in the description and check them out. Now back to the episode. Do you remember your first sale?
Yeah, well, that was Google.
That was the first?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, because I remember also, I remember going into the mirror, going to the bathroom afterwards and looking at my face, and I looked so happy, like as happy as I heard when I got twins. So they're like, they looked at my wife's, and then there's two of them.
Yeah.
That's nearly the level of happiness.
Yeah. You found out really at that moment?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So, so you go like, oh my God, because I think in the beginning, it's so tough because you're constantly worried about, will it work? Will it work? Have I done those? Your image is also on the line. I think that's also a key thing that people don't really talk about that much. I'm like, all this money. But to be honest, I was being very diligent with my cash. That's one of the things my wife Cindy said, like, we're not going to lose. We don't want to lose a lot. Like, this is the amount you can borrow, and that's it, right? Have clear things that what's the maximum amounts we're allowed to lose.
Yeah. And how much was that out of interest?
Well, obviously there was like the lost salary.
Yeah.
Which I didn't quantify just for not feeling that pain as much.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's quite significant.
Yeah, of course.
Well, if you could take that over 3 years, and then I borrowed about 125.
Okay.
And was that your initial startup?
Yeah, that was, and I just did, and I wrote a book actually called The Social Brand, and I did a lot of talks, for businesses, and I put that money directly into Tenzing. So that was actually my side gig. And what was good about that is that you just do that, and from a Tenzing perspective, so all the losses you make, you don't pay yourself and put that into the business. I did that from a Tenzing perspective, right? So
Okay, I'm with you.
So that just helped us go for like 3 years without getting funding in,
Okay.
and validate the business. So we already launched in Tesco. After we got, only then did we get like our funding round, because we were like, we already proved the case.
Sure. And just before you went to Google to get the sort of validation for the products, and after you'd spoken to the nutritionists, there was obviously that gap where you had to come up with the formula and actually make the product.
Yeah.
How did you go about doing that?
Well, again, like, that's, so you just talk to all these, like, what is going to be that perfect. So actually interesting, so I already found the nutritionist. I decided on, the plant-based bit, and already the sugar levels. And then I went traveling with the family, and then we were in Asia, and I discovered what they drink in the Himalayas. So they drink this really strong tea with salt and a lemon tea. And I really noticed it worked. And then I called my nutritionist, is this like, what is this, and why do I feel this is the placebo, or is it something here? And he said, yeah, that's a triple hit of natural caffeine, vitamin C, and electrolytes that then also became the basis of our recipe.
Okay.
And then I immediately thought of the Tenzing name. So I don't know if you know, it's based on Tenzing Norgay was the first man on Mount Everest,
right,
together with Edmund Hillary. And I just immediately, because my dad was always a huge Tenzing fan. I think my dad was probably like 7 or 8 when he climbed Everest in 1953, and it was my dad was always a big like underdog. It was like probably the biggest story that I know of coming from very little to actually reach the top of the world. He didn't even know exactly where he was born or how old he was, and then it was like in the 50s, it was all like, it was like the British and the Swiss, and they're all trying to get on there first. And the fact that he was from there and he said, I want to be on the top, and he made it. It's just incredible.
Yeah, impressive.
Yeah. So, and I always, remember that story from my dad. And then I thought, then just like Tenzing came to me. It was available because it's always very hard to find a name.
Of course. Every entrepreneur, I think, or artist has gone through the domain name process.
Definitely.
Of a domain name.
The domain's free. Oh, but it's taken on Instagram.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's free on Twitter, but it's taken on.
Yeah.
By a faceless account with no followers.
Yeah.
Give us the username. Yeah, totally.
But no, I let that go immediately, because domain names, that was even, but just like the trademark. Or you got to think, in the drink space, it's the same trademark as beer, juices, all soft drinks, all energy drinks. So, and I always thought start small, but the principle of like, why couldn't it be a global brand? So I wanted to have the European and the American trademark, which, imagine all the names gone globally in those categories.
Yeah.
So
imagine.
And then this thing came. It was actually a moment that was probably one of my most nearly spiritual moments, because it's one of those annoying, like finding a name. I thought up to that point was just annoying, because the ingredient, like I said, the ingredient process was cool. I speak to doctors, finding a name, like, everything was gone. Everything I had was gone. And then this came to me, and then it was available. And it was like it really
meant to be.
It was really felt like meant to be. And then at the trademark, I said, "Do I need permission from because he'd passed away, of course?" And said, "Do I need permission from the family?" And they went, "No, you don't, because it's a very normal name there. It's like, say someone from India or Nepal would call their drink John."
Yeah.
But I was like, and he's like, maybe best not to, because it might be a PR risk or whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm going. I'm going to find them, and I want to get their permission.
I'm so glad you said that, because I wasn't going to be the guy that's like, he probably should have got it. That's great. That
but it's like, it's amazing how many Tenzing brands, because I have in this category, there's a lot of Tenzing brands out there that never asked their permission.
Okay.
Wow.
So I went there, and and it wasn't very hard to find, because they're just on Google. It's not that I went. It's not the founding story. I went there. I traveled.
Yeah. I've got this image of him in like the Himalayas with like snow goggles and just like hiking up
a Netflix documentary in the making, basically.
Yeah.
They're obviously they're actually a very successful family in their own right, and they were really happy that I reached out, because there was like they said, well, none of them do. And we got a partnership going, and
that's cool.
Yeah, we work together now. We speak to each other. Each coming to because the 70th anniversary this year of Everest climb. So Jumling, the son that I speak to most, he's coming to London as well.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that's one of those beautiful things of starting your business. You never know. I never dreamed of
Yeah.
going there and meeting them, which
Sure.
extremely inspiring people. He climbed Everest a couple of times as well.
Wow.
He was actually on remember the 1996 horrible, what the movie is made of as well, Into Thin Air, the book.
No.
Anyway, so yeah, he was on the trip after that. So he's like got.
You mean, no, not Touching the Void. Is that something different?
No,
That's
it's different. It's a
yeah.
different. It's a movie's called Everest, I think.
Right.
Okay.
But like, a lot of people, passed away, and he was like on the trip afterwards. But
Wow.
Anyway, but he's super inspiring guy.
That's a lovely backstory.
Yeah.
Really nice.
In terms of the initial startup capital, do you remember how you divided it up? So kind of like what amount you put into things like making product, what amount you put into branding, marketing, advertising, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So
And could you have started a bit less, actually, just as a follow-on question?
Oh, great question. Yeah.
no, not. You mean 100? No, because the thing is, so in my side of the business, of my kind of business, the biggest chunk of money was needed to make the product because you have a minimum run of 150,000. So it's like
Wow.
Yeah,
So you had to take a punt on 150,000 cans of
yeah.
Tenzing.
Which I thought I was going to sell 1 million in the year one.
Bold.
Which was my plan.
Imagine if it just doesn't take off. At least you're always energized.
True.
And I sold 100,000. So 10% of the initial.
Yeah.
But and actually most of that was through Google.
Interesting.
Because
Okay.
Google have a free issue site, of course,
Right.
Yeah.
everywhere, and there's 15,000 people that work there.
Wow.
So but they bought it from me. So I think a big chunk of that business. That's why I always say, God, if I only done more of that pre-work, I could have done that. I could have done 10 offices. 10
Well, yeah.
places. But so that was a big mistake. But so capital, yeah. So that a lot goes in there, and I remember I did this talk at BBC right when I just started, and because you get that question quite a lot. I was like, oh, so you used to be in marketing, and now you have to do finance, operations, whatever, like product development, everything, design. And so what do you think is the most difficult? And I said marketing, because the marketing bit, if I was used to having millions of budget. And now you have nothing. How do you make something out of nothing? That is essentially what you're
That's
doing.
the $1 million question.
So I did also actually thinking. I spent too much time in the beginning of creating an Instagram account, and no one was there. Like I think in the beginning, what we did really well, and we should have only done. I should have just. Actually, we had the handle Tenzing on Instagram, but we should have just said, which I did on Twitter and all the other things, like, we're building the business now. We'll be back when when we can breathe again.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, it's just like getting listings and sampling. So just a lot of sampling. We go to Whole Foods, Planet Organic, with sample there, every day.
So how does that process work, sampling, for someone who maybe isn't familiar with
Well,
the
you just
industry?
stand in. That's why I just spend most of my time. You stand in Whole Foods.
Okay, so it's not getting
say-
permission to get a spot then, essentially.
It depends. So sometimes you have to get permission.
Yeah.
Other times you don't. So just moving. We had a little table you could walk around with. Walk in, sample.
Yeah.
Walk out. Yeah. Just try and sell on the spot.
Yeah, of course.
Go. Hey, I just started this business. Did you like it? It's like use that element of I've just given you something. So now you please buy a can.
Yeah.
If you find the exact right moment, they nearly always do.
Yeah.
And then because it is a nice product, people always came back to it. And I think that is also, to be honest, I think in the beginning it's all about the product. Still is that, to be honest. But so many people, what the worst I haven't spoken that a lot, but what the worst piece of content on YouTube is? Simon Sinek, but start with why.
You think that's the worst piece?
the worst
Why? Out of
piece.
interest?
That's my
because
that's my brother's favorite thing.
Yeah, you can let that go now.
Wow.
you heard it here first. That's that. Okay.
This is the biggest YouTube beef since Jake
Yeah.
Paul and KSI.
That guy sucks.
Wow.
I'm interested to know why you think that.
Yeah.
'Cause, a lot of people would disagree.
Let's get into
So,
the beef.
Very interested to hear that.
So, I always think when you listen, first of all, no, but I'm going to too much detail, I know. But look, that there is an extra thing behind your brand, for instance, for us, that we said we're from nature and we want to give back to nature, is a driving force for me to keep going. Is it I think one of his quotes, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
I wouldn't be sure. I don't
That's
know.
what
I've seen
that
some,
is-
I've seen,
that is
I've
what
seen
it
some of
says.
his
Yeah,
content,
yeah.
but I'm
You as
assuming
a
that's-
fan
that is.
should know.
Oh no, I'm not. I've seen a couple of his
Yeah.
videos and I think it was pretty cool, but I'm not like my brother's a really big fan of his, but I don't
Okay.
know much about him.
No, but it's basically what I don't think is good is that it's just not true.
Right.
So like if you think about, he used the Apple example, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And Apple was like, their why was they wanted to change the world. They wanted to like, think different, change the world. But that's not how they started, right? They started because Steve Wozniak was this massive computer nerd, built the best computer, and Steve Jobs was this great like kind of marketing sales guy, and they packaged it up really nicely and sold their first computer. So the first thing they did, there was no such thing as a little small computer at the time. You had to build them up yourself. So they were like a couple of guys in the garage trying to build the best computer they had. They didn't start with why. They didn't go, God, we want to change the world.
Yeah.
What do we do? Self-help books, festival. No, let's do computers. They didn't start with why. And I know maybe he doesn't mean it that way, but I think what's interesting is that a lot of entrepreneurs start with why. So I've had people I do the talk and be like, I found my why.
That must annoy you so much.
I'm gonna. That's why I started moaning, because a lot of people are coming to me with that. So my why is, so there's a lot of people now, and it's Brexit, and people are like, we have to get together more, and my why is I want to bring people together. And I'm like, okay, and what's the product? I'm not sure yet, but I'm thinking about a cookie. Literal conversations.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
I've got a logo. It's like a heart-shaped cookie. I'm like, so I think having a purpose behind it, it's mainly in the beginning to keep yourself going. But I think why do people start drinking us? Because they need a bit of energy. They don't like, maybe, it looks a bit more natural, the packaging. They then pick it up and go, this looks quite natural. They have a sip, like yourself, and go, this tastes great. You wouldn't have drank that because my why.
No.
You know what I mean? So he's just taking a concept. Anyway, I don't want to.
Okay. It's interesting to hear your point of view. And actually, to be honest, when you talk about it like that, I don't actually disagree, because people buy the product.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, if you have a really good product that stands above the competition,
Red Bull's an amazing example. Red Bull, when they started, it was like there was no such thing as a drink that gave you energy. So they didn't have any Formula One teams. They didn't have any extreme sports. It was a drink that gave you energy, and that alone built that. So in the beginning, you always have to get your product amazingly straight and amazingly well, and then you kind of, and it's good to have it intrinsically built in. Your kind of whatever you call it, why or purpose or like the bigger thing, because it's and so I've probably got one of the most purposeful brands, at least on the energy shelf for sure, right? We carbon label, we're a B Corp, but I think it just starts with, you have to get the product right.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an argument for, because I'm really into that kind of stuff, and I was actually about to say I like that you're a B Corp, and I noticed that on the back of the tin or the can. But do you think there's an argument from a marketing perspective to market different parts of the brand to different people, i.e. to the people who are in sustainability, run some sort of campaign that emphasizes the fact that you're sustainable, to the people who just want an energy drink that doesn't have any crap in it, market it as an energy drink to those people? Or do you think it's more like we have a general sort of angle and we focus on that?
I think the latter is probably the best in the beginning. Because you don't have the money yet to look at those audiences and find those audiences. Look, what I believe in actually as well is like that kind of, it's more you do that through the channel strategy. So like in our case, Google was our way into offices, so then people would drink it like as a office drink, which was quite relevant for us, because actually with Red Bull and Monster, I heard in the beginning people were like, yeah, I always have my Red Bull in a mug because I don't want to be seen with a Red Bull, because people think I have a hangover,
right?
Or like I don't want to be seen with a Monster. So there's quite a bit of a shame actually around energy drinks in the office space. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
I can believe that. Yeah, I can believe that. Yeah.
So with us, I mean, not everyone, but a lot of people do. So with us, it's like you can be proud to be seen with this because it's B Corp. It's like so there is this element that it all kind of works together. And we had another thing we did in climbing. So obviously we had like all our heritage in climbing. So we did it with a lot of bouldering walls. So our first bouldering wall was, the climbing castle in north of London. It was all like a vegan cafe and a really cool climbing spot. That's where we was one of our first places we launched.
Oh, cool.
And now we're in kind of 90% of the bouldering walls in the UK, and
wow.
that's how they drink there. So
interesting.
I think find those communities. I'm a big believer in that. Focusing on community and kind of make it big there.
Touching on Red Bull briefly, my first thought when I first read that you worked at Red Bull and then started this is there not some sort of competitor clause that, you know, you've worked at Red Bull, you can't now go and start your own energy drink?
It's always like timed. It's always a time frame. Yeah. So I made sure that I was outside the time.
Okay. Okay. Were there any funny looks from people when you did start, like people that you used to work with? What was the general kind of attitude?
I think there's three phases that every kind of. Do you call it incumbent? Is that the one that's already in the market? Is that the word?
Yeah, current incumbents. Yeah.
Go through. And first is like awareness. So people are just so focused on their own business, they don't even see other like people disrupting their business. Then it goes into like arrogance. That's never going to work. I know a guy at Audi, and he was like, when Tesla came along in the beginning, all the Audi guys were doing is looking at the BMW people, and the BMW people look at the Audi people, and they were like, disregard, that's never going to work. And then it ends with anger. So you go like, you know, the best example of that was when Uber was in Paris, and all the taxi drivers started protesting. Remember, they stopped the whole Champs-Elysees, and they stopped the Arc de Triomphe. Yeah, and they blocked the whole Paris, all the taxi drivers, and you know, Uber grew massively that day because all the Parisians were like, why are they blocking all the roads? Yeah, well, they're blocking this road because there's a cheaper option out there. I feel like, amazing.
The best free press.
Yeah, exactly. Good marketing.
So, you know, and I think that's, you know, I don't know. I think, so there's very long, there's been, I think, you know, that's because so many people have tried, and still, like, we're still tiny compared to them, but we are growing like 4 times faster. You know?
Yeah,
so I think that's the interesting bit.
I wanted to touch on, I suppose you've already touched on it briefly, but how do you sort of set yourself apart from your competitors in such a big space with such a relatively small budget to your competitors? As I say, you touched on it briefly with, you know, looking after communities and having certain sort of standards to your product, but any other marketing strategies that you think have worked particularly well that people can take away?
Well, I think I want to kind of expand on the community thing, because if there's ever so again, that's why I think also with this last thing I'll say about it, with the start with why, always look at who gives the advice, you know. And I think he was like a marketing or an advertising executive that came up with a great line. Sorry, but has he like launched it? Like, so you should look. Has someone launched a business in the rough area? Like, you don't listen to my advice either, I would say, because I could have done stuff that is not relevant to your business at all. Yeah. So I think you've really got to like nip. So if you listen to it, because as a starting startup founder kind of person, you are going to be listening. People are going to give you a lot of unwilling advice, and you're going to be looking out for advice everywhere. So that's what you've really got. So there's another rule actually that really went viral in the beginning, the 1,000 people rule.
Oh, the one? Kevin Kelly?
Yeah, get your first 1,000 followers.
1,000 true fans.
And then you're, again, I heard a lot of people saying this. I was diving into this. What's this 1,000 true fans thing? And that one, the guy himself said, look, what I did, he was in the music industry, and he said, if you've got 1,000 proper fans of your band, you could probably earn a living. Yeah. So you could probably, because they would buy your albums, they would buy your merch,
tickets,
and that would just be enough to earn a living. He didn't say that as a starting strategy. So he's just like, you know, so it was a very clever thing to say within the music industry if you just wanted to make just enough bucks to like earn a living.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but then that became a thing in the startup world. It's like first 1,000 fans. So I'm always wary if there's founders just banging out those
a tagline
starts with 1,000 fans. Okay. So, but I think one rule that is totally true for every single business is start in a small community or in a small area, because I would give me any company that is huge now that hasn't done that. So you can think of any, like, you know, Facebook, you know, one of the fastest scaling companies, just started. You had to be on Harvard. You had to have a Harvard email. And he was like, if you see the early emails, interviews with him, he goes, yeah, my team wants to go to Stanford, but I'm not sure. I want to like stay on Harvard because I want to make this experience more rich for the people here. Not that he was picky about Harvard people, but he just wanted to make it more rich, better. And then, okay, well then after like a year, they went to Stanford or something, right? And then it was for a very long time, you had to be a student. right? You're only allowed with the student email. You're only allowed on Facebook. So really small. I saw a presentation once from Deliveroo, the guy from Deliveroo.
Yeah.
He launched a one postcode. And he did a really cool presentation with the guy who was investing, because the investor lived in the postcode next to, and he said he wouldn't deliver at my post. No, because I'm only doing this postcode. Because Deliveroo is very perfect like that. You can just go get all the restaurants your postcode. He'd get on a bike himself and just deliver them.
Wow.
So, and then Strava is also a great one. So Strava, you know Strava?
Yeah.
Strava is like an app where you can like manage your like cycling and running.
Okay.
But essentially the technology you could do with any sport, right? Because it just measures how fast you go or your heartbeat. But they only did cycling for about 8 years. And their whole discussion was like, should we add running? No, we're not going to, because we want to make the experience for the cyclist more rich. So I think every business started with a small community that they could make super rich, super well. And then once you've nailed that, you go to your next one and your next one. So
That's a real, really
that's a real gem.
Because that goes back to what you said earlier about just going slow.
Just go slow.
And having a really long timeline.
Yeah, so because you never have the resources to, even now, I'm 7 years in, I'm only, we're doing really well in London. Like, we have about 40% awareness in London. Nationally, that would be like 15. And within London, we do really well within the climbing community. So, and again, I've launched in Holland now, which is going reasonably well, and especially in the climbing in Holland, because those climbers will follow a couple of our climbers that we kind of have athletes in, or they would have been climbing in London, bouldering walls. And so, and I actually think, looking back, maybe you shouldn't have done Holland yet. I should have just focused on London for a couple more years, right? So I think just like that urge of like wanting to expand, because I still do, but like you get like emails every week, like you want to launch in the Cayman Islands or in Finland or Nigeria, because I'll import you, and you go, and then they'll say, they're going to take 10,000 cans. Like, but don't go down that route, because I did a couple of times and I always regretted it, because we didn't sell it. Can we send them back? Whatever.
Yeah.
So just focus, keep it small.
I saw in another interview you did, you said something that I think is quite relevant now, which is you said how obviously you started Tenzing at 42, I believe, and you made a point about how nowadays with all the Zucks and the sort of young CEOs, there is this kind of social pressure that if you're not a billionaire by 22, you're kind of lagging, and there's probably no point for you. And you made some interesting points about starting older, but I just thought that was really relevant, because I think obviously at our age, we're sort of fully immersed in hustle culture and, the age of Instagram, where everyone's having a great life on the surface of it, which we all know isn't necessarily the case. But could you maybe touch on that a little bit? Because I found that quite an interesting point.
Yeah, so that was really cool, because I remember in one of, read an article, again, it happened to be the Harvard Business Review, about like, huge piece of research, literally 50,000 people or something, and they checked founders and which were most successful. And I always ask that, when I go to speak to students, for instance, I say, what's the best age to launch your business? What's the most successful age? So they checked what's the most successful age to launch your business. So in other words, at what age are you most successful? And everyone always goes like 24, 25. And it's 42, which I happen to be exactly 42. Okay.
Just skewed the numbers.
Yeah, no, exactly.
What do you know? I started then.
But that's the most started, the most successful, and that's the most started is 42. That's why the question is even better, because you're like, what's the average age that people start the most companies is 42, and the most successful age I think is 45.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Colonel Sanders does skew that a little bit, to be
honest
with you.
But I think actually, I also, from my own experience, it makes so much sense, because I think you've still got all the energy you need, right? There's not like, obviously you can't be like maybe a pro footballer anymore, but at 42, you still got every energy you need for like at least, the next 10, 15, 20 years. And you got all the experience, so you got all the network, the contacts, the experience in your field. So I think, it actually makes a lot of sense. And also it takes the pressure off, I think is an important one. Like you don't have to, I think, that's another also actually I think that all the successful founders have in common. It's not a recipe for success, but I think it's much more finding what you're good at than finding like a gap in the market. If you think about like the Fever Tree guys, for instance, really interesting, right? One was like a gin he was a CEO of a gin company, and the other was an advertising guy who made, whatever. I think he came up with 3 quarts of your drink as a tonic, so you might as well mix it with the best. And, them together was perfect because the one guy knew everything about gin and the other guy knew everything about how to launch a brand. So that combo was perfect. Zuckerberg was so young, so you get these because he was just like in this new world of he was the best programmer that there had ever been, right? Like he was on Harvard, he was like amazingly good. He didn't find a gap in the market unless he's even the social
he created
network.
A new market.
Well, he stole the idea, which was like you could even argue that now I'm going to sound like a negative person.
Well, like Call is sending shots on everyone.
But the fact you could argue the fact that he has no problem with stealing ideas and launching them in a better way is what he did his whole career. Right, and you could argue that's a very smart move. So he then he saw Instagram story, buy that, and then the stories, everything. Just pick something up and better and do that well. So I think you have to be really good at something. So that's why it also, again, if you're younger, find something you love doing and hone in on that. Maybe you're not going to start a business. Who cares? It's not like life's better if you start a business or anything. But if you do, then you're really good at something, and then you've got a good shot of launching something that in the field that you're good at, as opposed to, I found this idea, I saw this thing in America, and I'm going to launch it now. Those don't work as often, I think.
Just because I'm conscious of time, I really wanted to get your opinion on this as a marketing expert, because I'm really passionate about branding and marketing. And I think my question is, in the age of social media, where content is king and everyone's making it, how do you stand out?
Don't go on social media. Well, I was the part of my book I said it's called The Social Brand, but it's about being social as opposed to being on social media per se. It's like, so for instance, we did a lot with running. So again, from a community perspective, we started with climbing. Then at one point we said, okay, let's add another community that can we add value here? And I also, because again, I think also from an authentic perspective, I love running. So especially since I started my own business, right? It's like a way to keep myself sane. So I used to, like we were just saying, I lived right by the river. I'd run by the river. And at one point I came home and I read an article that it said, it's actually sometimes you might as well not run in London because the pollution is so bad. So it negates all the positive effects of running.
Oh, really? That's terrifying fact.
I know. So depressing.
So also me as a passionate runner, doing that to keep physically sane and safe. And then it was from Imperial College, that data. And then I reached out and I said, look, you published it, but can we not do something more with it? And then we linked that data. So we built an app with their data and we linked it with Strava. Okay. So we said it was like the Tenzing Clean Air Tracker. It's still live. And it's like, finding clean air to run in the big smoke.
Oh, wow.
So we did some, obviously it wasn't on social. We created our own app. It was voted best app of 2020 by Men's Health.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Okay.
And that's a beautiful example of we love this running community. We are runners ourselves. What do we all hate? Running and pollution. It fits with our kind of ethos of, fresh air and naturalness. And we created that for our runners, and then they will. So it's really cool as well in Strava. If you've downloaded the app, and then every time you run, it will say your Tenzing Clean Air score in the app, so the people that you follow will see Tenzing. So so then because they find it useful, they then share about it as opposed to us trying to. I think that's why I said of course I said very often people are too worried about creating something viral, but it's so difficult. Like you can't.
And also, I think in a culture where, especially with short form content, it's so more snappy.
Yeah.
And I think that when there's the push to be viral and everyone has to make content all the time, you do lose that authenticity because it's hard to, you can't make an authentic piece of something all the time, 24/7. You're going to have to compromise on something for that degree of output. So I think finding an alternative angle, I think is really good.
Finding something that you actually do.
Right.
So it's as opposed to creating a piece of content. So the other thing we did was really cool, was totally spontaneous, was in COVID. We were going to, with Jumling, we were going to go out and do a trek in Everest. We were going to climb Labuchi East with a whole group of, people that wanted to join. It's like 20 of us would go, and 20 people signed up for this. It was like a paid trip with Jumling to go climb.
Yeah.
Then COVID broke out. The trip was cancelled. And I remember me and Emily were like discussing this, and it was like, it was a depressed time because we're like, oh, is our business going to survive? But actually looking back, it's a really creative time for us as well, because we thought, okay, what do we do? And then we said, maybe this group that went is willing to climb Everest in their own home. So they climb the whole height. So we calculated how much steps they'd have to climb.
Yeah.
And 5 embarked on the journey, and 1 guy made it.
Oh wow!
Okay. So he made like Everest in 24 hours, like throwing up. It was like it was like this proper athlete.
Yeah.
And he did Everest in his own home, and that made like the Washington Post, Time Magazine, Sky News. So it's like these real cool things that also kind of happen spontaneously sometimes that then get the viral press or yeah.
Just before we ask our last question, one more question I have to ask as a marketing guy. Do you have any references for anyone who might want to, maybe they're a businessman and they want to, improve the marketing for their business, or maybe they just want to learn more about marketing in general? Are there any sort of books or references or people or anything you'd recommend?
So of course my own book,
Yep.
Social Brand. Not a lot of, but I think there's not a lot of people that wrote a book and then launched a business.
Yeah.
So it's the other way around. No, but I think it's funny if I wrote it in 2014 or something, but the whole principle actually of giving something, it's all about giving something real and then letting that do the work as opposed to thinking of making something that goes viral. But I don't know if you can learn a lot from it, but I just love the Shoe Dog book so much. I think it's probably one of my top 3 favorites.
From someone who doesn't like reading, and I absolutely love that book.
Because I thought what was so cool about, I think if you're an aspiring, and I really, obviously Nike is like, out there, but I think how he wrote that, it really related with me, as in like, God, it's tough. And it's like, he was so honest. And also what I learned from that actually, because one of the things, so you read it as well?
It's been on my list. He's been nagging me for months.
Yeah,
that's why I've stayed silent, because I know I need to.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah, you've read it?
Yeah,
because he's so honest as well.
He
Like,
is.
I cried at the end because it was with his kid, with his
Yeah,
sons, and he neglected his children, basically said. And so I would have done that without reading the book, but I read that right in the beginning, and I was like, for me, it was like, family always first, team always first. So I think that's what I learned from that book. It's just like, you have to to build this business and then kind of not even have seen your sons, like, would that be, that's not worth it. And I think that whole kind of hustle culture, like working 70 hours, I don't think it's true, to be honest. I don't do that. I just make sure I spend a lot of time with my family. Because are you really effective or efficient if you work 15 hours a day or 16?
I agree. Couldn't agree more. And it's so nice to hear someone actually voice that. So
definitely.
I completely agree.
It's not spoken about enough.
Completely. And there's not enough people speaking about it.
No.
It would be amazing to go for hours, and honestly, we'll have to have you back on at some point, because this is
really cool.
A gem of a conversation.
It was.
Just before we wrap up, we have one final question we ask all of our guests, which is, as you know, the point of this podcast is to ask successful people exactly how they did it, and we like to drill into the practical. So if you could give one piece of advice for someone looking to start their own business, or maybe someone who already has a business and they're looking to improve it, one piece of advice that's actionable or practical, could be marketing, budget, branding, anything like that, what would you say?
Well, I would just repeat the 2 points actually. I don't know if it's one, but like the one is just like validate, just because the biggest things that go wrong, it's not like, you and your co-founder are not getting a budget. It's just like they say, market product fit, right? Is your product really relevant, and is it new, right? Because if it's relevant but it's already been done 5 times, it's never going to work. If it's new but not relevant, then it's those 2 simple things. Is it relevant and is it new? But you might think so, but and don't check with family and friends like I did. Check with someone who would actually buy your product. Check with like a Google. And that's the cool thing, like I said, that will actually help you buy it in. If they do find something that's interesting about it, it's an easier sell to them. So just go to the market, whatever product you have, because with every product, I think you can make kind of that minimum viable product. It's not only in the digital world, it's also kind of in every single place, I think. So that would be my main.
It's a great piece of advice.
Huib van Bockel, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Really
the camera's yours. Where can people find you or find Tenzing? Let them know.
Well, just like on Instagram at Tenzing, or follow my journey on LinkedIn. My name is hard to pronounce, but it's the only one out there. So if you somehow, publish it somewhere, then you can find me on LinkedIn. Tenzing Natural Energy is our website. But yeah.
Thank you so much. And it really is a great product. I mean, as I said, I'd never tried one before, and I really have enjoyed it. So
it's my first time trying it as well. It's delicious. It really is delicious.
So thank you. And we're not sponsored.
I know.
So that's real.
Like we are.
Yet. Not yet.
Exactly.
No, honestly, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. Guys, what an amazing conversation. So many gems. If you enjoyed it, make sure to rate 5 stars on whatever audio platform you're listening on. And obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, then subscribe, turn on post notifications. We've got plenty of interesting conversations coming. And a huge thank you to Huib for coming along today, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Cool. Thank you.